What if the most powerful creatures in the entire galaxy were being thrown away like trash? What if every single species looked at them and said, "We do not want these"? And what if the only one who said yes was a little human girl? This is not a fairy tale. This is the kind of story that makes you stop and think about what the word different really means. In a galaxy full of powerful alien races, there was one rule that almost every species agreed on. Albino hatchlings were bad luck. They were weak. They were defective. Nobody wanted them. Nobody asked for them. And every single one of them was thrown away before they ever got a chance to prove who they really were. That is, until she showed up. She was 10 years old. She had golden curly hair and bright, curious eyes. She had no weapons, no rank, no power. She was just a little human girl on a space station far from Earth. But she asked one question that nobody had ever asked before. And that one question changed everything. Today, you are going to hear her story. You are going to find out why every alien species rejected those hatchlings. You are going to learn the dark secret that had been buried for 200 years. And you are going to witness the moment little girl's kindness shocked an entire galaxy into silence. 3 things are going to surprise you before this video ends. First, you will find out what those albino hatchlings were truly capable of. Second, you will discover the real reason every alien rejected them. And third, you will see how one act of human love became the most talked about moment in galactic history. Let me show you exactly how this happened. The space station was called Verath Prime. It floated quietly in the dark between 3 star systems. It was not the biggest station in the galaxy. It was not the most beautiful either. But it was important. Very important. Verath Prime was the meeting place of the Galactic Council. This was where the most powerful alien species came to talk. To trade. To decide the fate of worlds. Dozens of alien races had seats at the Great Council table. They had been meeting there for over 400 years. Humans had just arrived. Humanity was new to all of this. Just 20 years before, humans had made first contact with the Thurin, a tall blue-skinned species with 6 fingers on each hand. The Thurin were surprised. They had not expected humans to figure out faster than light travel so quickly. Most species took thousands of years. Humans did it in just 300. That made some aliens nervous. That made others curious. And it made a few of them very, very uncomfortable. Ambassador David Chen was one of humanity's first representatives to Verath Prime. He was a tall man with kind eyes and a calm voice. He had spent 15 years studying alien languages and customs before he ever set foot on the station. He believed deeply that humans could earn a place among the stars. He also believed in patience, in watching before speaking, in learning before judging. He also brought his daughter with him. Her name was Mara Chen. She was 10 years old, small for her age, with wild golden curly hair that never stayed neat no matter how many times her father tried to fix it. She had her mother's bright green eyes and her father's stubborn chinches. She asked questions constantly. About everything. About everyone. Most of the alien staff on Verath Prime did not know what to do with her. She was not dangerous. She was not rude. She was just endlessly, relentlessly curious. She wanted to know how everything worked. She wanted to talk to every alien she met. She wanted to understand things that most grown humans never even thought about. The station was a wonder to her. There were Thurin diplomats with their long robes and clicking speech. There were Gorak traders with their thick stone-gray skin and booming laughs. There were Velshari scientists with 4 eyes and hair like silver threads. There were dozens more, each one different, each one fascinating to Mara in ways she could barely put into words. She explored every corridor her pass allowed her into. She learned words in 6 alien languages within her first month. She could say hello, thank you, and what is that in Thurin, Gorak, and Velshari. The aliens found this either charming or annoying, depending on who you asked. It was on a quiet Tuesday morning. Station time. That Mara first saw the hatchlings. She had been walking through the lower cargo levels, looking for the observation window that faced the red dwarf star to the east. She had her little notebook with her, the one she used to draw pictures of everything she discovered. She turned a corner and stopped completely still. There was a large, clear container sitting in the middle of the corridor. Inside it were 4 small creatures. They were unlike anything Mara had ever seen. They looked almost like the dragons from her storybooks back home, but smaller, much smaller. Each one was about the size of a large cat. They had scales that were completely white, almost like fresh snow after it falls and before anyone steps in it. Their eyes were deep red, like 2 burning embers set inside pale faces. Their claws were small and delicate. Their tails curled around their tiny bodies as they huddled together in the corner of the container. They were shaking. Mara knelt down slowly in front of the container. She pressed her small hand flat against the clear surface. One of the hatchlings looked up at her. It had the most extraordinary eyes she had ever seen in her life. Deep red, swirling slowly, like 2 tiny galaxies spinning inside the pale face. She whispered without thinking. "Hey," she said softly. "It is okay," the hatchling blinked at her. She looked up at a passing Thurin maintenance worker, moving quickly through the corridor. "What are those?" she asked. The Thurin stopped. He looked at the container, but his expression was nothing like Mara's. There was no wonder there, no curiosity, something much closer to pity, or maybe something past pity, something colder. "Solvak hatchlings," the Thurin said flatly. "Albino ones, what does that mean?" Mara asked. "It means they are being disposed of," the Thurin said simply. And then the worker walked away, as if the conversation had already been over before it began. Mara stayed kneeling on the floor, her hand still pressed against the container. The hatchling with the swirling red eyes was still looking directly at her. It had not looked away once since she knelt down. She did not move for a very long time. Mara did not sleep that night. She lay in her bunk on the human quarters level and stared at the ceiling above her. She kept seeing those red eyes. She kept hearing that one word echo over and over in her head. Disposed of. She had looked the Solvak up after dinner, while her father reviewed diplomatic messages in the next room. The Solvak were a respected reptilian species in the council. They had been members for over 2 centuries. They were known throughout the galaxy for their intelligence, their physical strength, and their extraordinarily powerful memory. A bonded Solvak companion was considered one of the greatest honors any species could receive. Most council members waited years just to be considered for the privilege. But the albino ones were different, or so everyone believed. According to the council records available to human visitors, albino Solvak hatchlings had been considered defective for as long as the records showed. Their white scales made them stand out in ways that other Solvak found disturbing. Their red eyes made elders uneasy. There were ancient stories deep in Solvak cultural history that said albino hatchlings carried bad fortune with them, that they were hollow inside, that they would never bond properly with any keeper, that they were dangerous in ways that could not be measured or understood. So they were rejected at birth. Every single time an albino hatchling emerged in the bonding pools, the Solvak elders removed them quietly and quickly. They were placed in containers and sent to the station's lower levels. And from there, without ceremony or record, they were disposed of. This had been happening for over 200 years. Nobody had ever questioned it. Not once. Mara got out of bed at 4 in the morning station time. She found her father in his office, still awake, hunched over his screen reading through diplomatic communications. He looked up when his daughter walked in wearing her pajamas with her hair more chaotic than usual, and her green eyes completely alert. "I need to ask you something," she said. He knew that tone well. He put his screen down and gave her his full attention. "There are 4 albino Solvak hatchlings in the lower cargo level," she said without any preamble. "They are going to be disposed of in the morning. I want to ask for them. I want to keep them." Her father was quiet for a long moment. Mara, he said carefully, that is a Solvac cultural matter. It is their tradition, regardless of what we personally think about it. If humans interfere with that without invitation, it could cause a serious diplomatic problem for us. We are new here. We are being watched very carefully by every species on this station. Every move we make matters right now. I know, Mara said. If I approach the Solvac elders and make a request like this, they may see it as disrespect, as a judgment on their practices. That could set back everything we have built here in the last 2 years. I know that too, she said. So you understand why this is complicated. I'm not asking you to ask for them, Mara said quietly. I'm asking if I can ask for them myself. Her father looked at her for a long time. There was something in her eyes that he recognized immediately. He had seen it before. Many times. It was the same look her mother had carried when she decided something was right, and no argument anywhere in the universe was going to move her from it. He exhaled very slowly. I will arrange a meeting with Elder Zothrak, he said. But Mara, I need you to understand something before we walk in there. They may laugh at you. They will almost certainly refuse. And they may be genuinely offended that you asked at all. You need to be completely prepared for every one of those outcomes. I am prepared, she said. The meeting was arranged for the following morning. Elder Zothrak was ancient even by Solvac standards. He was enormous, nearly 3 meters tall, with dark green scales that had faded to gray at the edges from age. His eyes were deep gold, and they seemed to look straight through whatever they were pointed at. He had 5 other Solvac council members with him, all equally large, all equally unreadable. Ambassador Chen stood to the side. He was there as her guardian only. This was Mara's moment to speak, not his. Mara stood in front of Elder Zothrak, the very top of her curly golden head barely reaching his chest, and she looked up at him without flinching even slightly. Elder Zothrak, she said clearly, I am Mara Chen. I am human. I am 10 years old. I saw the albino hatchlings in the lower cargo level yesterday. I would like to ask for them. I would like to be their keeper. The room went completely silent. Then one of the younger Solvac council members made a sound. A low, rumbling sound that rolled through the chamber. Mara had learned to recognize it. It was laughter. The others joined inches. Elder Zothrak did not laugh. He looked at her with those gold eyes moving slowly over every detail of her face. Then he spoke in his deep, stone-grinding voice. A human child, he said slowly, wants the defective ones, the broken ones, the ones our own kind will not touch. Yes, Mara said. Why, he asked. Mara gave an answer that made the laughter stop instantly. Because nobody else will, she said. The laughter died completely. Elder Zothrak stared at her. The other council members shifted in their places. The room felt different now. Like something quiet and invisible had shifted in the air between everyone standing there. That is not a reason, Elder Zothrak said slowly. It is the best reason I know, Mara replied. Another long silence. Then, to the complete surprise of everyone present, the elder made a decision that nobody in that room had predicted. Not the council members. Not Ambassador Chen standing against the wall. Not even Mara herself. He said yes, but not because he believed she was right. He said yes because he was completely certain she would fail. He believed that within a week, the human child would return with the defective hatchlings and beg him to take them away. He believed this would teach humans clear and necessary lesson about respecting galactic traditions they did not understand. He told her all of this directly and without any softening. Mara listened to every word carefully. Then she thanked him politely and walked out of the room. That afternoon, 4 white hatchlings with red eyes were transferred to the human quarters level. Mara named them that same evening. The smallest, the one with the swirling red eyes that had first looked up at her through the container wall, she called Frost. The second, slightly larger with a habit of tilting its head all the way sideways when something confused it. She called Ember, the third, who was always first at the food dish, no matter how quietly Mara tried to set it down. She named Cinder, and the fourth, the one who stayed in the back of every space and watched everything carefully before it moved at all. She called Ash. Nobody helped her with any of it. The Thurin staff avoided her corridor entirely. The Gorak traders laughed openly when they saw her walking through the lower levels with 4 tiny white creatures following at her heels. A Velshari scientist stopped her once in the main corridor and told her very seriously that she was making a diplomatic mistake that could affect humanity's standing on the council for the next several decades. Mara thanked her and kept walking. Her father watched quietly from a distance. He worried constantly, but he did not interfere. He had made a promise, and he intended to keep it. The hatchlings were genuinely difficult in the beginning. They did not eat well those first days. They startled badly at loud sounds. They huddled together in corners and watched everything with those burning red eyes. Completely still, like 4 small statues carved from snow, Mara read everything the station archives had on Solvec biology. She adjusted their food. She kept the room quieter than she personally preferred. She sat with them for hours at a time, not forcing any contact at all, just being present, just being there. On the 5th day, Frost came forward. The tiny white creature crossed the whole distance between them on delicate claws and pressed its face gently against Mara's outstretched hand. Mara went completely still. She barely breathed. Frost made a sound. A soft, low vibration almost like a purr but deeper. More complex, like music heard through a thick wall in another room. Over the following days, the others followed. Ember first, then Cinder, then Ash, cautious and deliberate as always, on the very last day of the 2nd week. But something else was happening alongside the bonding. Something that Mara began noticing and writing down carefully in her notebook. The hatchlings were growing faster than any record she had found suggested they should. Normal Solvec hatchlings took 3 months to reach the stage where their cognitive responses became measurable. At 3 weeks, all 4 of Mara's hatchlings were showing behaviors that the records placed at the 6-month mark. Frost had started mimicking sounds. Not random sounds. Specific ones. Words Mara had spoken in the corridor just outside the room. Repeated back with perfect clarity and perfect timing. Ember had begun solving the simple environmental puzzles Mara left out for enrichment. Not slowly. Immediately. Cinder demonstrated something that could only be described as spatial memory, navigating the entire complex corridor network of the human quarters level without a single wrong turn after seeing the layout only once. And Ash, quiet, watching Ash, was reading, or at the very least doing something that looked exactly like reading. The young hatchling would sit directly in front of Mara's screen for long stretches, red eyes moving steadily and deliberately across the text. And when Mara tested Ash by hiding objects in locations she had only described in writing, the hatchling went directly to every single one. Mara wrote all of it down. She was not a scientist. She was a 10-year-old girl with a notebook and more curiosity than most adults she had ever met. But she understood enough to know that what she was watching was not normal. She also understood that if she told anyone, they would not believe her. So she kept writing. She kept watching. She kept her door locked. Because somewhere in the back of her mind, a question was forming. A question that was going to eventually change everything. Why exactly had the Solvac been throwing these hatchlings away? 6 weeks after Mara first brought the hatchlings home, something happened on Verath Prime that shook the entire station. A Gorak cargo vessel docked at the lower bay with a critically damaged containment system. The vessel was carrying volatile plasma cells used for deep space fuel processing. A full containment breach in that kind of cargo could trigger a chain reaction capable of destroying the lower 3 levels of the station completely. The alarm started at 0300 station time. Emergency protocols activated immediately. Alien crew members scrambled to their positions throughout the station. Ambassador Chen was in the emergency communications room within minutes, coordinating with the station director. Every corridor on the lower levels was sealed and locked. Mara woke up the instant the alarms began. But she had actually been woken a few seconds before the alarms sounded. All 4 hatchlings had woken up at exactly the same moment. Simultaneously, not from the alarm, because the alarm had not gone off yet. They were standing at the door of the room, completely still, all facing precisely the same direction. Their heads were low. Their tails were stiff and straight behind them, and their scales were changing. Mara had never seen that before. Tiny patterns of light were moving beneath their white scales. Slow at first, then building, like bioluminescence waking up inside them. Like something deep in their biology was switching on for the first time. The light moved in steady pulses, traveling from their tails forward to their heads, synchronized across all 4 of them. Ash turned and looked directly at Mara. Then Ash did something that stopped the world. In perfect, clear English, in Mara's own voice, Ash said 2 words. "Follow us." Mara did not scream. She did not run backward or grab her communication device or call for her father. She stood very still and looked at Ash for a long moment. Then she put on her shoes. She overrode the door lock using her father's emergency access code. The 4 hatchlings moved ahead of her with quiet, absolutely purposeful steps. They were not running. There was nothing panicked about their movement. They were precise, deliberate. They led her down 2 corridors, then through a maintenance shaft, then along a route through the station that Mara had never seen before. They stopped at a junction panel on sub-level 4. Ember and Cinder pressed flat against the wall on either side of the panel. Their bioluminescence was very strong now, pulsing rapidly. Then Frost and Ash placed their front claws against the surface of the panel. The light from their scales flowed forward out of their claws and into the metal of the panel itself. The surface glowed white for a single bright moment. And then the panel system, the one controlling the damaged containment bypass for that entire section of the station, simply corrected itself. The station alarms went silent 30 seconds later. The emergency response team reached sub-level for 7 minutes after that. They found a fully repaired containment bypass that should have taken a complete engineering team, a minimum of 2 hours, to restore manually. And they found Mara Chen sitting cross-legged on the floor with 4 white hatchlings arranged calmly around her. She was trying very hard to appear as though nothing unusual had taken place. She did not succeed. The team leader, a Velshari engineer named Sorath, examined the panel for a long time, then looked at the hatchlings, then at Mara, then back at the panel. "How did this happen?" Sorath asked very carefully. "I am not entirely sure," Mara said honestly. The report Sorath filed that morning did not include the full details. Sorath was a scientist. Sorath needed to understand something completely before putting it into an official record. Because what the panel showed, what the precise repair pattern indicated, was a form of bioelectrical energy manipulation, a form that had no entry in any known species database. The information moved through the station quickly after that. Quietly, not through official channels. The way information always travels when someone is trying to contain it. In whispers in corridors, in exchanged glances across tables, in conversations that stopped the moment an outsider appeared. Elder Zothrak heard it before noon. He sat alone in his private chamber for a very long time afterward, because he knew something that the Velshari engineer did not. He knew exactly why the albino hatchlings had always been disposed of. It was not because they were defective. It was not because they were weak. It was because 200 years ago, the Salvak Elder Council had made a decision. A cold, political, deeply shameful decision. And every generation since had kept that secret carefully buried under layers of tradition and superstition, and the simple, quiet practice of throwing away the evidence before it could speak for itself. But now the evidence had spoken. In English, in a 10-year-old girl's voice. And Elder Zothrak understood that what had been hidden for 2 centuries was about to come into the light. The council emergency session was called 48 hours later. Every species representative was present. The chamber was the largest space on the station. High ceilings of deep blue crystal. Curved walls lined with the symbols of every member species. It was a room designed to remind you of how large history was, and how small any individual moment felt inside it. Mara sat in the observer section with her father beside her. She was the only child in the room. Elder Zothrak stood at the center platform. He was not moving yet. Not speaking. Just standing there with his ancient gray-green scales and his deep gold eyes, staring at something that only he could see. Mara watched him carefully. She had spent the previous day doing something very specific. She had asked Ash to help her search. And Ash, who had been growing more communicative every single day, had helped without hesitation. Together, a 10-year-old human girl and a 6-week-old white hatchling with red eyes had gone carefully through 400 years of council biological archives. What they found was not hidden behind any lock. That was the strange part that stayed with Mara long afterward. It was not encrypted. Not classified, not sealed behind any security level. It was simply buried under centuries of other data, never searched for because nobody had ever thought to look. Nobody had ever had a reason to look. The first record was dated 212 years earlier. A Solvac biologist named Keth had submitted a research paper to the Council Science Archive. The paper was titled simply, Anomalous Cognitive and Bioelectric Properties in a melanistic Solvac hatchlings. A melanistic was the precise biological term for the genetic variant responsible for the white scales and red eyes. The paper contained 47 documented conclusions. Mara had Ash work through every single one. The albino hatchlings were not defective. They were not hollow. They were not carriers of bad fortune or instability. They were the opposite of every single one of those things. The amelanistic gene variant produced a fundamentally different neurological structure in Solvac hatchlings. The areas of the brain that handled sensory processing in standard Solvac were dramatically expanded in the amelanistic variant. They processed incoming information faster than any recorded Solvac brain. They formed connections between concepts at a rate that had no comparable measurement anywhere in the biological database. Their bioelectric output was not random static. It was controlled and intentional. And when properly developed through bonding, it could interface directly with electronic and energy-based systems in ways that had never been recorded elsewhere. In the simplest possible language, they were the most cognitively advanced beings ever formally studied. The paper had been submitted to the Council Archive, and it had never been acted upon. Because 3 days after Keth submitted it, the Solvac Elder Council of that time had filed a formal counter-document. The counter-document did not challenge the science at any point. It acknowledged every finding completely and directly. And then it argued clearly that this was exactly the reason the albino hatchlings should continue to be destroyed at birth. An amelanistic Solvac that reached full maturity with a proper keeper bond would become extraordinarily powerful. Not merely intelligent, not merely capable, but capable of things that would make every other species on the council deeply and permanently uncomfortable. The Elder Council of 200 years ago had been precise and honest in their reasoning. They were afraid, not of the hatchlings themselves, but of what other species would do the moment they understood what a mature, bonded, amelanistic Solvac could accomplish. Of the political power that would immediately attach itself to any species that held one. Of the war that history suggested would almost certainly follow that kind of imbalance. And so they made their choice. Dispose of them before they develop. Tell no one. Wrap the practice in ancient superstition deep enough that even their own people would never question it. Make it feel like culture. Make it feel like protection. Make it feel like something that had always been true. For 200 years it had worked perfectly. Until a 10-year-old human girl asked one question. Mara stood up in the observer section. Her father placed his hand gently on her arm. She looked at him for a moment. Then she looked across the chamber at Elder Zothrak. And Elder Zothrak looked directly back at her. There was something in those ancient gold eyes that had not been there the last time she stood in front of him. It was not anger. There was probably some shame there, she thought. But the thing that she noticed most of all, the thing that surprised her the most, looked almost like relief. Like a very old, very heavy thing was finally being set down. He began to speak. Elder Zothrak spoke for a long time. He told the full council everything. He told them about Keth's research paper. He told them about the decision made 200 years ago. He told them about 2 centuries of hatchlings disposed of before they could become what they were meant to be. He spoke without pausing, without looking away from the assembled representatives, without flinching once throughout the entire account. The chamber was completely silent the whole time he spoke. When he finished, nobody moved. Then the Velshari representative stood slowly from her seat. How many? She asked very quietly. How many hatchlings over 200 years? Elder Zothrak gave a number. It was a very large number. The chamber remained in silence for a long time after that. The kind of silence that has weight to it. Mara was not looking at the chamber. She was looking at the floor in front of her seat. Frost was sitting on her foot, which the hatchling had begun doing whenever it sensed that Mara was feeling overwhelmed by something. Ember and Cinder were pressed gently against her sides. Ash had one small claw resting very lightly on the back of her hand. She breathed slowly and steadily. Her father sat beside her and said nothing. He just stayed close. The debate that followed the session lasted 3 full days. Every species had a position. Every species had fears. The Gorak wanted immediate restrictions on a melanistic Solvac development. The Thurin demanded a full investigation into the 200-year cover-up. Several smaller species were genuinely frightened by what a mature bonded amelanistic Solvac might be capable of doing. There were voices calling for containment. There were voices calling for a dozen different things all at once. But through all 3 days of debate, 4 small white creatures with red eyes sat quietly in the observer section with a 10-year-old girl from Earth. And anyone who watched them long enough noticed something that the debates could not account for. They were not frightening. Frost was watching the council translation feeds with focused and intensely curious red eyes. Ember had tilted its head all the way sideways at a Gorak argument and made the small sound Mara now recognized clearly as disagreement. Cinder had fallen asleep pressed against Mara's side, which happened reliably when Cinder had decided something was not worth worrying about. And Ash was writing. Mara had quietly placed a stylus and a small tablet on the bench. Ash had been writing continuously for 2 hours. On the second day of the debate, Mara asked to address the council directly. There was a long procedural discussion about whether human child should be permitted to speak at a full formal session. Ambassador Chen made her case with quiet and steady diplomacy. In the end, it was Elder Zothrak who resolved it with a single statement. She is their keeper, he said simply. By Solvac tradition, a keeper speaks on behalf of their bonded companion in any formal setting. She will speak. Mara walked to the center platform. She was small. The platform was large. Her boots made quiet sounds on the blue crystal floor with every step. She unfolded a piece of paper. Real paper. She had written her words by hand because she felt they were more honest that way. She looked up at the assembled council. I am 10 years old, she began. I am from Earth. I do not know everything about galactic politics. I do not know all the history here. I am not a scientist or a diplomat or a council member. She paused. But I know Frost, Ember, Cinder, and Ash. I know that Frost learned English in 3 weeks. I know that Ash reads faster than any human I have ever met. I know that Cinder can memorize every corridor on this entire station after walking them once. I know that Ember and Cinder repaired a containment breach in 30 seconds that your best engineers said would have taken 2 hours. She looked slowly around the full chamber. And I know that every single quality you are afraid of, every single thing that makes them powerful, is also what makes them good. Because they have had all of those abilities since the moment I brought them home. And in all that time, with everything they are capable of, the only thing they have ever used it for is to protect. She folded her paper carefully. I asked for the ones nobody wanted, and they became the best thing that ever happened to me. What would have happened if someone had asked for them 200 years ago? How different would things be right now if every single one of those hatchlings had been given just one chance? She walked back to her seat. Frost climbed immediately back onto her foot. The council voted on the 4th day. The disposal practice was ended permanently and unanimously. A full research program was established immediately. A formal apology was entered into the galactic record by Elder Zothrek on behalf of the Solvek people, the first formal interspecies apology in the history of the council. And one final thing happened. Ash walked forward and presented the writing tablet to the council floor representative. What was on it was not a message. It was not a statement. It was 200 hours of precise observation, recorded in perfect systematic detail. The hatchling had been composing a complete biological and cognitive self-assessment. Data that no external researcher could ever have produced. Data that answered directly every single question the council had been attempting to resolve. The Velshari chief scientist read the first 20 pages and then stopped speaking entirely for several minutes. She called it the most significant scientific document submitted to the council in living memory. It had been written by a 6-week-old hatchling. A 6-week-old hatchling that everyone had tried to throw away. Mara Chen held Frost closed that evening and looked out the observation window at the stars spread out below them. Billions of them. Each one a son. Each one possibly home to something nobody had found yet. She was 10 years old. She was from Earth. She had no weapons, no rank, and no power. But she had asked one question, and that one question had changed a galaxy. Here is the part that stays with you long after the story ends. Frost, Ember, Cinder, and Ash grew up on Vereth Prime. They grew up under Mara's care, with her reading to them and learning with them and staying close through all of it. And as they matured, the Galactic Council watched everything. What they witnessed over the years that followed was not what the fearful voices had predicted. There was no arms race. There was no conflict. No war over power or political imbalance. The mature Amelanistic Solvak did not become weapons. They did not become instruments of control or dominance. They became something far harder to define and far more valuable than any of that. They became bridges between species that had never fully understood each other, between scientific fields that had never thought to connect, between old wounds in galactic history that had been sitting open and unaddressed for longer than anyone had wanted to acknowledge. Ash became a council mediator, the first humanoid mediator in the council's 400-year history. Frost became something between a historian and an artist. Frost created works that every species experienced differently based on their own biology and culture and memory. Something in the bioelectric quality of those works made them universally felt in ways that no translation could have achieved. Ember became a teacher. Cinder slept through a considerable portion of galactic history and seemed completely at peace with that decision. But here is the truth that brings everything all the way back to where it began. None of it would have happened without one very simple thing. Not technology, not diplomacy, not strategy or political calculation. It happened because little girl looked at 4 creatures that an entire galaxy had decided were worthless. And she thought, maybe everyone else is wrong. That is the most human thing in this entire story. The willingness to look at what everyone has already rejected and ask, did you actually look closely? Did you give them a real chance? The hatchlings were never broken, never defective, never bad luck. They were simply waiting for someone to ask. And the universe, it turns out, is full of things waiting for someone to ask. If this story opened your eyes even a little, you already understand exactly why it matters. That was the story of Mara Chen, a 10-year-old girl from Earth. 4 white hatchlings with red eyes, and one question that changed the course of galactic history. Before we close today, I want to give you the 3 biggest things worth carrying with you from this story. The first is this: the most powerful things in any world are often disguised as the most rejected. Frost, ember, cinder, and ash were being thrown away across 200 years of history because they looked different and grew different, and behaved in ways the people around them did not understand. Everything that made the rest of the galaxy uncomfortable about them was actually the exact source of their greatest gifts. That is not just a detail in a science fiction story. That is something genuinely worth thinking about in real life, in every place where human beings make decisions about who and what deserves chance. The second thing: tradition is not the same as truth. For 2 full centuries, the Solvec elders passed the practice of destroying albino hatchlings from one generation to the next. They wrapped it in superstition and called it protection. But underneath the layers, it was simply very old fear dressed up to look like wisdom. Fear dressed up as tradition is one of the most quietly dangerous things in any civilization, real or imagined. And Mara did not dismantle it loudly. She did not attack it. She just asked one honest question, and the tradition could not survive honest contact with one honest question. The third thing, the most significant change in this entire story, was started by the least powerful person in every room she walked into. No rank, no weapons, no political history, just genuine curiosity, genuine care, and the quiet refusal to walk away from something that needed someone to stay. That is what good humans do, in stories and everywhere else. Now here is what I want from you before you go anywhere. In the comments below, tell me this one thing. Which of the 4 hatchlings do you think you are most like? Are you Frost, the one who was first to trust even after everything? Are you Ember, the one who is always watching and always learning? Are you Cinder, the one who stays completely calm when everything around them is in chaos? Or are you Ash, the quiet observer in the back of every room who is taking in everything and has something profound to say precisely when it matters most? Tell me below. This community always has the most thoughtful answers, and they always end up surprising me in the best way. If this story moved you, if it gave you something worth feeling today, please hit that like button right now. It takes 1 second from you, and it genuinely helps this channel reach more people who love stories exactly like this one. Every single like tells the platform that this kind of storytelling deserves to be seen. And in a feed that is full of noise, that matters more than most people realize. If you are not subscribed yet, please subscribe right now and turn on the notification bell. This channel posts new HFY stories every single week. Stories about humans doing extraordinary things in extraordinary circumstances. Stories about kindness being more powerful than weapons. Stories that remind you why the human spirit is worth something in a universe that is very, very large. And if you want to keep watching right now, the next video is already waiting for you. It is the story of the first time human soldier refused a direct order from a galactic fleet commander, and why that single refusal saved 40,000 lives. Click it now. I promise you will not want to stop. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for listening to Mara's story. And thank you for being exactly the kind of person who sits down to watch a story about a little girl and 4 white dragons and thinks to themselves, yes, this is exactly what I needed today. See you in the next one.